G'day, it's me again. Now, as I've demonstrated before, a good people mover is a way better choice for most families than an SUV, despite an SUV being the most popular choice. And my family of 5 has just lived with the newest one on the block, and that's the 8-seat Hyundai Staria for the past 6 months and 9,500 kilometres. The Staria has more space than pretty much anything on the road, including the Kia Carnival we lived with before and the Hyundai Palisade SUV we lived with before that. But is there such a thing as too much space? If you're wanting to skip ahead and find out right away, I've split this video into chapters, and if you're looking for more detail, you can read my full review and thousands of others over at the CarsGuide site. Before we get into the everyday realities, just have a look at the Staria.
You get the feeling someone in the Hyundai design team is a bit of a fan of monorails, and I find that people either love it or hate it, but I reckon it's just tops and looks like a spaceship rolling down the road, particularly at night with the big monobrow DRL lighting right across its front.
It could have so easily looked like a big box on wheels, so I commend Hyundai for putting so much work into the Staria's design. If you consider it alongside the looks of the Ioniq 5 EV, it seems that Hyundai is emerging as a design leader. Usually with our long-term tests, we stick to one version of the car, but this time we've done things a bit differently, in that we've spent the first half of the test with the base Staria V6 petrol 2-wheel drive, and the second half with the top-of-the-range Highlander diesel all-wheel drive you see here. There's an $18,000 difference between the two of them, so it's an interesting exploration of whether the top one is actually worth it.
Our base Staria was black, and you'd be doing well to pick the differences between them on the outside, given they've got the same wheels, trim, and the only different badge on our Highlander is the H-Track badge on the back to signify all-wheel drive.
So rather than give you a detailed breakdown of every single feature each of them has, I'll stick to the highlights and lowlights of each.
The base car has cloth seats, which is comfortable but not as handy as leather for cleaning up after messy kids. It also gets smaller screens in the dash, which is no big loss in reality, but the biggest things we didn't like were the lack of power sliding doors and tailgate and any window tinting. The manual doors are quite heavy to open, and you really wouldn't want one sliding shut on a child, so you've got to be careful when parking downhill. The window tinting isn't usually a big issue, but the Staria's windows are huge, which makes you quite visible to those outside the car and generates a lot of heat in the middle of summer. When we swapped over to the Highlander, its leather trim, climate control for both front and rear, retractable window blinds, power doors and tailgate were all welcome additions, but these also come with the mid-spec Staria Elite for $7,000 less.
Yeah, the Highlander also brings dual sunroofs, heated seats and a few other things, but the coolest thing you get for your extra $7K is a rear occupant camera, which is great for watching the kids on the back seat, and it's even got night vision. But you've got to dig through the menus to use it, and you lose the multimedia screen at the same time. So if it were my money, I'd probably be spending it on the Elite. This is where the Staria really needs to shine, and that huge body leaves a lot of room inside it. Starting at the boot, the numbers don't really tell the story here, as it's measured differently to the Kia Carnival, which is the only model that can hold a candle to the Staria. This is at its smallest, with the third row seat slid all the way back. And as you can see, you've got a fair chance of fitting 8 people's worth of luggage back here. And with the Staria's really tall roof, it's also really handy for fitting really tall things like giant party balloons. Slide the third row forward and drop back to 5 seats, and there's a mountain of storage back here. And my favourite party trick is to load the pram without even folding it. But it's not quite as clever as the Carnival back here, in that that third row seat doesn't fold down into the floor and therefore enable an even longer boot floor. This may not matter to you, but it means that my 26-inch mountain bike will only just fit back here diagonally across the entire boot floor, whereas it fits straight in the Carnival. There's also a few storage pockets back here for things like first aid kits and change mats, and also really impressively, there's a full-size spare underneath the boot floor. But there is a trap to look out for. The Staria's high roof and low floor means it's got a massive tailgate, which then means you've got to park at least 1.5 meters from anything to get it open in the first place. This is something that really takes some getting used to. The side doors make up for this somewhat by being sliding doors and powered in this Highlander. And what does that mean? It means you can park next to other cars and never have to worry about your kids swinging their doors in them ever again. And not only does the powered option look real cool, it also makes it much safer and easier to open and close these massive doors. Back seat space is outstanding, as you'd hope, with arguably the most room in the third row of any car on the market, with really good access. There are no child seat mounts back here though. The second row slides and reclines, but you don't get the removable and reversible centre section like you do in the Carnival. And there's also only 2 ISOFIX child seat mounts back here. Now these, plus the centre top tether mount, do actually make the Staria ideal for our 3 child seats though. Up the front there's lots of handy storage spots, and the controls are all generally really easy to use, as you'd expect from a Hyundai. And the Highlander also has these 2 dash top storage boxes for even more storage. One strong hint that the Staria shares a lot with the Staria Load commercial van is the hard plastic on the centre console lid here. If you put coins there, they'll rattle like crazy.
And now for a montage. There's cup and bottle holders for all 3 rows. And the same applies to USB points, but note they're all USB-A, not the latest USB-C.
One final observation about the Staria's practicality, which might seem a bit obvious from someone of my diminutive 172cm height. The Staria has too much headroom from front to back. So unless you've got a family of NBA players, the Staria's height is a bit of a waste and actually gets pretty close to the maximum height in multi-storey car parks, and makes about as much sense as the high ceilings at your grandparents' place. All Starias carry a maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating against 2021 criteria, and impressively, all the important safety features are standard across the range.
It also doesn't get side airbags in the second row, like some models in this price range, but the head-protecting curtain airbags do cover all 3 rows, unlike quite a few vehicles with 3 rows of seats. All the other big active safety feature boxes are ticked, plus a notable mention for Safe Exit Assist, which prevents the back doors from opening if an oncoming car is detected. All Starias also get Rear Occupant Alert, which basically sounds an alarm if you lock the car with someone still sitting in the back seats. Like all Hyundais, the Staria carries a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty and 12 months of roadside assistance, which is pretty standard these days, but the roadside assistance is extended by 12 months when you go to Hyundai for a service. Service intervals are the benchmark 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, and cap price servicing is quite well priced at $1,800 in total, spread over the first 5 years. Now, there's a bit more value to our efficiency test than usual, given we split it across the base petrol V6 and the Highlander diesel. So if you're trying to work out if the diesel is worth the extra $3,000, this should be a big help. Our 9,500 kilometres of Staria test was split pretty much equally between the petrol and the diesel, and while none of these results were outstanding, it's interesting to note that the petrol doesn't really use that much more under real-world family conditions. So how long would it take for the diesel to pay for itself? Based on our test and the average price of petrol and diesel in Sydney at the time of filming, with diesel costing 19 cents more per litre, it would actually take more than 90,000 kilometres to amortise the extra cost of the diesel version.
Well, it is great to see that there's 2 drivetrain options, so you can choose between outright performance and efficiency. It would be nice to see a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid version using some of the equipment that Hyundai already has in its arsenal. There's a few points of difference to the Staria driving experience. Even though the Staria's floor is quite low, the seat is actually mounted quite high, so you sit a fair bit higher than a Carnival or any Hyundai SUV for that matter. But plenty of people actually prefer the higher up, commanding view of the road. Aside from a relatively high centre of gravity, the steering and suspension is still very car-like, so it feels much more like a car to drive than the people movers of the past. And the suspension handles rough roads quite well, and it's really quite stable, and it's nice and comfortable on long highway trips. It's just tall. The all-wheel drive of the diesel Staria is one clear advantage over the Carnival, and even though there's not much clearance and you won't get very far off-road, it's pretty handy if you spend a lot of time on dirt roads or you often head to the snow. The performance difference between the petrol and the diesel is actually quite significant, and you're really making a choice between, oh wow, a van can do that, and oh yeah, that's good enough. And considering the diesel's efficiency gain is really quite marginal, I'd be tempted to save my $3,000 and go for the petrol. Otherwise, the Staria just generally gets the job done, with the only other real minor niggle worth mentioning is that the transmission selector is a push-button affair, so you've got to look down at it every time you need to make a choice, and the handbrake or emergency brake is on the other side of the steering wheel, so it turns what would be a one hand no eyes job into two hands and two eyes every time you go to take off. May I once again applaud Hyundai's design team for coming up with the Staria. I genuinely think we'll be looking back on it decades from now as a high point. And that level of bold design hasn't compromised its family practicality one bit. It may be tall, but that's because it shares its body with a commercial van. The Staria isn't as clever as a Kia Carnival, and some will find its outright size a bit daunting, but as a family car, it gives you a great sense of being ready for anything. If I were spending my money, I'd probably pick the Elite petrol version, and there's a very good chance it'll suit your family better than any SUV, given it's ready for the adventure you're on right now, rather than the one you might go on one day.